Hi, I'm Zantsi. You are listening to Farmers Inside Track, proudly brought to you by Foodform Zantsi. I am Patricia Timbo, specialist journalist at Foodform Zantsi, and welcome to episode 535. So today we are discussing the importance of formalizing your farming business or agribusiness and ways that you can do that. So, of course, this episode promises to be both informative and practical as we welcome Dr. Siphe Zantsi. He is an agricultural economist at the Agricultural Research Council, and he will walk us through why it is so important to formalize your agribusiness. Let's get into it. Dr. Siphe Zantsi, welcome to Foodform Zantsi's podcast, Farmers Inside Track. I think it's been a long time coming, so we're glad to have you on today's episode.
Patricia, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Been waiting for this for so long.
Finally, we do have you on the episode. And Dr. Zantsi, you are quite a force as an agricultural economist in the sector and at the Agricultural Research Council. And you're also a frequent contributor on our page, Foodform Zantsi. But for those listening who may not be familiar with your work, maybe give an overview of your role in the industry.
I'm an agricultural economist at the Agricultural Research Council in a unit called Economic Analysis. I'm now the acting senior manager in the unit. So the role of the unit is to provide economic intelligence to the ARC's natural scientists at different institutes. The Agricultural Research Council does agricultural research and is mandated by an Agricultural Research Act of 1990. So we do all sorts of agricultural research on major agricultural commodities. And we have about 11 institutes across the country which specializes in different commodities. For example, in Potchefstroom, we have grain crops there because grain is so big in that side. And in Stellenbosch, we have Infotech, Netfor Bay, dealing with vines and deciduous fruits. So we have institutes across the country, but most of them, or 6 of the 11, I think they are around Pretoria. We do provide that economic intelligence to these natural scientists and quantify the impact of the research that they are doing. So mostly it would be developing new or breeding new cultivars, better performing and adaptive to the harsh conditions, or developing new vaccines. So we quantify the impact of such work to the whole sector. We have had in the past a series of impact assessment studies, also quantifying the rate of return to investment because we working or using taxpayers' money, so we have to give an account of how our work is helping the sector. Besides those roles at the ARC, I'm also an associate editor in 3 journals, Agricon, which is leading agricultural economics journal in Southern Africa, and South African Journal of Agricultural Extension, and then in an international journal called Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems. There's a section there on agriculture and food economics.
Thank you, Dr. Zantsi. Yeah, you are booked and busy with very valuable research at the ARC, as well as being an editor across 3 journals. And I'm particularly excited to speak to you just because I've seen how much you value farmers and the efforts that they put into South Africa's agricultural value chain. So going into today's topic, we will be discussing, how farmers and why, and just diving into formalizing a farming business. And of course, I think you are the perfect person to unpack this for our farmers listening. And going right into the first question, what does it mean to formalize a farming business in South Africa?
To formalize a farming business, it means making it formal. This is, of course, need to be unpacked. It means moving from being informal, unregistered operations to an official recognized entity by registering it through a relevant authority. And so that's basically what it means. Also, if you think about it in a more casual way, is now taking it more seriously by documenting everything that you're doing on your farm. So mostly we're speaking here, I think, with rural and urban households who are cultivating small pieces of land and keeping few animals to attain an additional food or income source. So most of them, they would think like, no, I'm just doing a small operation so I can remember everything all the time. So why do I need to keep records? Why do I need to formalize this business? So those are the sort of questions that farmers, especially small-scale farmers, tend to have towards formalizing their businesses.
Then I just have a small follow-up question. Is it possible to have a business that is registered but still functioning as an informal business?
I think it goes to how you think about how you would define formal. So in the sense where the context that we're speaking from is formal, it means you are registered, you keep stock or records of everything you do in such a way that if there is an investor who wants to invest in your farm, you can just table everything for them without even saying, okay, I'm not sure about how much I produced last season or something like that. And if they want the business bank account, you can provide it easily. If they want the proof that a business has been registered, all those things are right there.
Now I'm thinking now maybe from a farmer's perspective, everything is functioning. They are making ends meet as an informal business. So what would the reason be for them to formalize a business, and when would that happen? So, in the life cycle of a business, when do they identify that, okay, now it's time to formalize my business?
You should do that as soon as possible. I know that the kind of farmers that maybe some will be listening, farmers who I've just described, people who are doing a formal job somewhere, but doing this on a part-time basis. So they think formalizing this business, it's a job and a half if I'm not depending on it for the time being. So I think, yes, farmers would rather say, okay, when it's making money, then and I'm depending on it, I will start formalizing. Yeah. But I think ideally you should do it as soon as possible, because as we will delve more on those, when you want investors or you want funding, then they will have, or you want support from the government, you will have to produce proof that you've been farming and proof of how you've been performing all the years. So when you're asking farmers, as the ARC, we normally go to farmers doing surveys. When you ask them about when did they start, you'll see that it's many years, even 20 years. But when you inquire about the production in the early years, a farmer cannot remember that. And now imagine you are talking to a potential investor or banker who wants to finance your business. Then do you think they will have confidence in your operations if you can't remember certain things? We need to think about it in that perspective. And also, my thing will also delve in this is also for succession. You won't be farming forever or be active forever. There will come a certain time in your life where now you can't do the business the way you used to do, and you have to give it to someone else, probably one of your children. So where will they start if there are no records or information talking about how did this start and are we doing operations? So these are simply things that you not really pay attention to. But if you sit down and dig deep, you will see that this is available information that we need. For example, I would make a story or put some context to what we're talking about. Black farmers in the 1800s or so were really doing well and farming at a commercial level before there were policies that suppressed them. But since the suppression took long, all that skills of keeping a business and doing farming formally and taking it as a business have sort of vanished throughout the years, But if you think about record keeping and also formalizing business, I think if we did that from the beginning, some of the information we'll still have, or those families, those farmers will still have. But now, since it was many, many years ago, and I think there were no records kept or information kept about the operations, it's difficult to go back.
Thank you, Dr. Zantsi. So now you've convinced me as a farmer. I see now okay, I need to register my farming business. But being a farmer would think is okay, what are the first steps? For a lot of farmers, it can be intimidating. They might not have the sufficient documents or records to register their businesses. So what are the first steps that a farmer needs to take?
So the first step is to register your business. In South Africa, according to the law, is that all businesses must be registered, not only farm businesses. Any business, whether you are repairing cars, you are a mechanic, you have a small business, or you're selling apples, you're a street vendor, you should be registering your business. There is Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, which is abbreviated as SIPS. That's where you need to register your business with the name that is unique to the business and your details as the owner of the business. There's a fee that you will pay, but I think it ranges to the type of business that you register. But I think every farmer can afford to pay that fee. And then the second step, it would be to go and open a business account. So when you go to SIPS and register your farm business, you will get a certificate with unique identifier of your business. Then you open up a business account for your business. So when you go to a bank, normally they will be asking you, you want a personal account or a business account? So you choose the business account. So you pay, it depends on the bank you go to, but I don't think it could be more than 300 Rand in these commercial banks. So they will also want the name of the business, which you have SIPS. Then you'll have a card for your business. So what you will be doing now, when you have the business account, it means that when you're doing operations now in your farm, whether you want to purchase inputs, for example, fertilizers, seeds, or animal remedies, if you transfer money even from your personal account to the business account and use business account when purchasing, that's a simple way of keeping proof of all your transactions. Because now if you get a statement, you will see how much money you have spent on inputs, even for yourself. And also when you are selling your produce as well, then people can deposit the money to your business account. That's a very important step. Separating your personal and business matters, it's very important. That's how the financiers determine whether you are a serious farmer or not. Once they see that on your business account you have swiping grocery from Checkers or any other retail store, they start knowing that no, the account is not strictly for business. Tend to mix personal and business transactions. Then the third step is to go and register for tax clearance with SARS. I think that's one of the things that farmers, to say, okay, once I do this, the government will be taking all my little income that I'm making from this business. Not really. Not everyone in South Africa is paying tax or is eligible to pay tax. So there are income brackets and also for businesses, because the government understands that there are small business, there are medium to large businesses and mega businesses and so forth. So for small businesses, I don't think they pay tax. For example, the reason I'm thinking they don't pay is because land reform beneficiaries, most of them are exempted from tax for a certain period until they are established commercial farmers. So if land reform beneficiaries are not owned but work a huge amount of land, are not paying or exempted from tax, then it means all these other farmers, small-scale farmers who are farming on communal land or farming in the former homelands, I don't think there will be a need to pay tax. So that's the third step. Then the other step is to buy a stamp or make a stamp for your business. You know, the stamp that you see whether you go to SAPS, you want some documents to be certified. There are companies that are making those stamps, and now the stamp will reflect the details of your business. So why do you need that? You do that and also you pay an invoice book, which is fairly cheap in retail stores. So why do you need to do that? If you're operating in an informal environment and you're dealing with small transactions from your clients, they are likely to be paying cash, so you use that to keep records of the transactions. And also sometimes you'll be paying your laborers a small fee, maybe 100 rand. You don't need to be transferring that via bank accounts. You can just keep cash and then make a receipt and you stamp it. You scan that and you keep a soft copy of it. Because if you keep a hard copy for too long, then it can fade away. Then in many years to come, you won't see what was that transaction about. So in a nutshell, those are the 4 steps that you can start with when you want to formalize your business.
Of course, once a farmer has registered their business, it opens up many more opportunities for, I suppose, investment. Maybe talk us through that and how formalizing a business can improve access to things like financing for a farmer.
We can appreciate the fact that during COVID-19, I think after a few months of it, there was a support from the government called COVID Relief Support Grant or Fund, and they need the proof I was referring to. For example, how much have you been spending on your inputs and how much money were you getting back? To determine the amount of support you need to keep your business running. So many farmers miss that opportunity because they don't have these records in place. So having a registered business, it helps you a lot. Also, the banks, if you talk about any commercial bank, even the state-owned agricultural bank, the land bank, they need that information to know how have you been performing, how big are your operations, to determine how much amount or loan they can give you. And also, it makes matters easy because now the money needs to be transferred to your business account, not into your personal account, because you're applying for finance to finance your business. But besides those, I think it also helps you as a farmer to make informed decisions about the operations of your farm, not really based on assumptions. For example, the cost of inputs, they increase maybe every year. But when you're planning as a farmer and you're not really sure about the cost of these inputs, you might budget very little amount of money for inputs because you don't have the financial records about how much you've been spending, for example, in your inputs. So it plays quite a big role to get finance. And as I said earlier, that if you go to land bank, for example, to ask for a loan, and they say, okay, give us your business statement. And they would see that you have been purchasing groceries or even purchasing alcohol from this business account. That might jeopardize your chances of being approved for a loan. Also, I think in another front, I think formalizing your business can also increase the value of your farm when you sell it. You see, if you look at vehicles, if you're purchasing a vehicle, so it's more expensive than a vehicle that doesn't have a full service history or it has a half service history. Why is that so? The reason is that information is necessary for the buyer to make informed decision and It's also for certainty, you know that this car has been serviced since it was bought. So the chances of it having problems are very, very, very limited. But if you don't have the full services, how would you know? How sure are you if the car has been taken good care of? You don't. So even for your farm, someone will see that you've been making this amount for these years and they have all the operations and the records of it. Then it might fetch higher prices in the market.
When it comes to registering their different business structures, of course, I'm thinking maybe some of the farmers aren't familiar with what those business structures are and how they differ. I am not a business head, so maybe you can break down the different business structures and how a farmer can determine which one that their business would fall under.
So we have quite a number of them. For example, if you look at sole proprietorship, partnership, company, and so forth. So sole proprietorship is when you are the only owner of the business, which is ideal for most farmers, but a decision of which one to take among these, it will depend on the position of the farmer and their goals, the business. For example, we know that when you talk about cooperatives, we know that there is a lot of data and stories about how these have failed in the rural areas. The reason is if you are many partners in a business, but you don't have common goals, then that creates problems. There are free riders, people who just want dividends, but would not be working. This is also true for the land restitution cases, where there are a group of community members acquire the farm and there is these co-ops that are created, CPAs, Common Property Association or something like that. So there are some problems when you are multiple partners and the benefits are just so little. But I would say it depends on the objectives and the position of the farmer. But ideally, if you look at most commercial farms now, they are taking their companies because there is a cost that you pay when you transfer land after, for example, the owner of the farm, if it was your parent, passed away, then you want to transfer the farm to your name. The main reason is that it's applied on land. But now if the farm itself is a company, not really a farm, so all the assets of the company now, it's in a structure of shareholders. So the shareholders will have a certain percentage of share in the company. But now it's easy when you want to buy others out. They can sell the shares to you or to other people. And also through a will, then if someone passes away, they can also say, they want their shares to be taken by, which is good. But also partnership, you think of cases where you only have one resource of factor of production. Maybe it is land. Then you don't have the other factors of production, but there is someone who can complement what you have. For example, they have implements, they have other sorts of capital. So I think in those cases, depending also on objectives, can be helpful. But my advice in this would be also these type of businesses, you should make it formal. There should be a formal agreement, whether it's an affidavit or you do it through lawyers. Because in the beginning, when you meet and do business, everything seems well and it's working. But it will not be always like that. And if you think about the future now, when you've grown up and your children would want to inherit what you have been partnering on, that's where now comes a problem, So it's always to be on a safe side, because someone would be saying this today and tomorrow they're saying a different thing. So whichever business structure you choose, it's good to also formalize it and put it in writing in a legally recognized way.
Thank you, Dr. Zantsi. So from what I'm hearing, it is quite important for a farmer then to seek legal advice in this process of formalizing their business. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
So now the business has been registered. We've gone through the first steps, that a farmer would apply in that process. They've identified the structure that works best for them. And of course, now for farmers, an important consideration that they have is the markets that they have access to. How will me formalizing my business affect my market access and the market that I already have?
This is very important. If you are in business, the main goal is to make money. And also in it, there's also trust involved if you are doing business. So you want to do business with someone that you can trust or a company that you can trust. And now formalizing a business also comes into play because you have an arrangement. For example, you are producing for a certain retail store. They would want an agreement to say, okay, you will supply us with this number of cabbages per week or per month or so you, in that contract, someone would have to, they put their trust on your business. Now, if you don't, the business is not formal. How many people or businesses do you think they would want to have a contract with that farm? Very, very few, because you know that anything can go wrong if you don't have those documents. It's very, very important, especially now if you think about exporting your products. There are even more documentation needed. That will even include police clearance to check even the owner of the business if they have been convicted of anything, So many more records would be needed in that, even about the type of workers, from which racial group are they from, how much are you paying them, So all those things are needed, could be needed in international business transactions or deals. So if a farmer is planning to grow their business to export some of the produce, then definitely they need to formalize it and register.
Of course, with anything worthwhile, challenges arise. One would hope, of course, that, once the business has been formalized, it's smooth sailing from there. But of course, we know reality is that challenges do arise. So when it comes to farmers who are in the process of formalizing their businesses or who have, what common challenges have you seen and what is your advice in tackling those challenges?
From the farmers I've engaged with, especially small-scale farmers, because the issue of not formalizing your business is more common on small-scale farmers because of the nature of the farming. You are doing it on a part-time basis. You have another source of income or main source of income. So you feel like, I'm not yet there. That's what you will be saying as a farmer. So I think the main challenge is when and how to start, of which we have tackled it in our first questions. When and how to start. So, there's a lot of procrastination among farmers to say, okay, I will start doing this once I reach a certain level of my farming business. But the farmer performs the business operations informally forever. So I think the challenge is not knowing how to start and when to start. So we've said we should start as soon as possible. Because imagine now you're starting to formalize your business and start keeping records. When you have 1,000 sheep, you have 200 head of cattle, and maybe 1,000 of chicken. Do you think it would be much easier than when you started, when you had only 10 head of cattle and maybe a 30 a flock of sheep? Obviously, it's much easier when the operations, the farm business is not really that big. So that you can also learn as it grows now and see, and it will also be a proof that you started in A. And at a certain period in time, you are in C or D. That's also what financiers would love to see, because Although financiers, they work with collateral such as land to give you money. But I think the other biggest deal of collateral, which is not really often pronounced, is the skill of the farmer. Because you can have all the other assets or tick all the other boxes. You have land and it's secure, you have a title deed. You have other machinery in the farm that we can take if you don't pay up the loan. But it all depends on the skill. Is this farmer capable of making profit or using these resources available and generate profit? So that's also important. And if you look at this example that I've given, then it will show that you can turn things around. And that also boosts confidence in your financiers to give you loan. Or your partner, if you want to partner with someone, then they will say that, no, I'm partnering with a good guy here.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Zantsi. And just to support what you're saying, we recently had an episode with an abattoir manager. He's an expert in this area. And he was saying how poultry farmers specifically who are supplying to abattoirs actually start seeing higher profit margins than just staying as with the informal market and selling live birds. But of course, to supply to abattoirs, you'd need to formalize your business. So that's just an example that it opens up so much more, for a farmer who's wanting to grow. Are there government or private initiatives that support farmers in the formalization process?
Yes, I think they are. What comes into mind is the land bank, because land bank is a state-owned bank. Its main mandate is to financially support farmers, and mostly black farmers or farmers from historical disadvantaged racial groups. If you look at the cohort of farmers they need to support, their literacy level in terms of financial operations tends to be low compared to white commercial farmers. So they need to take them by hand through every step of the way. And now if you're giving them money, then you also need to ensure that whatever land you have given them, they will turn into something that they can benefit, and they also repay the rent you have lent to them. In that process, I believe they help them with business plans and also connecting them to the markets. And I think in that process, this formalization of the business, it needs to happen, because now they need to track your progress, because you're repaying the loan for a number of years. So they have to see your income statements at some points, so I believe Land Bank has a program that is taking care of this. Last week, we had a visit from students from the University of Venda and some colleagues from the Land Bank. They explained some of this process when we were talking to the students or presenting to the students. So I believe they do have this program. Also, I think some provincial departments of agriculture, I could say they would offer or do business plans and could help in this regard if farmers need it. I know, for example, the Western Cape Department of Agriculture, I think they do this.
Thank you. So really a farmer doesn't have to go through this process alone. There's support available. We have covered everything for this podcast. Dr. Zantsi, unless if there's anything else that you'd like to share.
Thank you, Patricia. At the ARC, we can help farmers who need to be advised on this, especially how I have explained the process. We would be happy to help farmers as one of the state entities.
Thank you so much to Dr. Siphe Zantsi, who is an agricultural economist at the Agricultural Research Council. If you want to read more about today's topic, you can visit www.foodforumzansi.co.za. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. From myself, Patricia Timbo, our technical producer, Megan van der Vent, and the rest of #Team Food Forum Zantsi, thank you for listening.